Well, I'm now joined live by commentator on Russian affairs, Marcus Papadopoulos. He is there in the UK. Marcus, well, there has been no intervention yet, no troops deployed in Ukraine, and yet very strong international reaction, and not unexpected.
Well, first things first, talk of a military confrontation between the West and Russia is extremely far-fetched. Russia is not Serbia, Russia is not Iraq, and Russia is not Libya. Russia is a nuclear and military superpower, so it can't be touched militarily by the West, which undoubtedly will be to the frustration and annoyance of many in Washington. But I'm not surprised by the West's response to what's been happening in the Crimea over the last few days. And I think it's fair to say that the West's response amounts to hypocrisy and drivel. Since when does the United States government genuinely subscribe and defend the concepts of sovereignty and territorial integrity? They're certainly not doing that at the moment in Syria, where they're backing militants who have taken over border crossings in the north and in the east of the country. They certainly didn't do that when they attacked Libya. They certainly didn't do that when they invaded Iraq. They certainly didn't do that when they attacked Serbia over Kosovo and then later on recognized Kosovo's unilateral declaration of independence. And the United States certainly didn't do that in 1991 and 1992 when it recognized Croatian independence unilaterally and Bosnian independence unilaterally. So I think it's very important for ordinary people across the world to realize that the United States government merely pays lip service to sovereignty and territorial integrity. It picks and chooses.
We've been hearing that many Russians in Crimea fear for their lives. Is sending in troops justified if it indeed did happen?
There is a genuine fear amongst millions of ethnic Russians in Ukraine and millions of Russian-speaking Ukrainians in the country. And that fear is about the rise of neo-Nazism in Ukraine. And we've also seen that in the Baltic states of Estonia and Latvia. And so the Russian government has every right to ensure that ethnic Russians and Russian-speaking Ukrainians are protected. And it's deplorable how we're seeing Western journalists completely discard those genuine concerns of millions of people in Ukraine. And that comes down to ignorance. These journalists do not understand who a lot of these people are in Kiev who have illegitimately taken power.
All right, and Marcus, not just journalists, but it seems that the West is supporting a government that does, of course, include many who are attached to right-wing parties. There's a very extremist nationalist element within that Kiev government. Why is that being ignored by Europe and indeed the US?
Well, because those people in Kiev who illegitimately took power by ousting the democratically elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, are fiercely anti-Russian. And Western politicians and Western journalists, they're turning a blind eye to ultra-nationalists, anti-Semites, neo-Nazis, who are now starting to take up positions in this illegitimate Ukrainian government. And many of these Western politicians and Western journalists, they've never heard of Stepan Bandera before. They've never heard of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army before. They've never heard of the Organization for Ukrainian Nationalists. You know, when the Russian government pinpoint these three people as having been neo-Nazi collaborators, they're absolutely correct. But ordinary people listen to this interview around the world. If they don't want to listen to the Russian government, if they don't want to listen to RT, if they don't want to listen to me, they should contact Yad Vashem, contact the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and both organizations will tell them exactly who Stepan Bandera was, for example.
Just very briefly, is this going to escalate more? Where's it all heading? It's been very fast moving in the last 24 hours or so.
It's an extremely fluid situation and it's extremely concerning. To resolve this, what needs to be done is this: the clock needs to be turned back. We need to go back to the agreement that was signed between President Yanukovych and the opposition parties under the auspices of the European Union. And that agreement stipulated that there would be early presidential elections in Ukraine and that there would be a national coalition government. That's the way we resolve this crisis. That was the agreement that President Yanukovych signed. That was the agreement that the opposition signed. That was the agreement that the European Union put their name to. But now, of course, we see that the opposition ousted President Yanukovych. And let's remember, what we're seeing in Crimea today is because a democratically elected president and a democratically elected government have been ousted. Let us not forget that.
Marcus Papadopoulos, live here on RT International. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts.